Icebergs are known to be hazards to ships, but now there's a big one off Greenland that's actually threatening an entire village.
In the quiet seaside village of Haven's Edge, the arrival of a massive iceberg just off the coast quickly became the talk of the town. The locals, who were used to seeing bits of ice drift in from the north now and then, all came out to get a look at this huge visitor. But as the morning light grew brighter and showed the iceberg's real shape, a wave of surprise swept through the crowd. People stood there stunned, their faces going pale as they stared at the unbelievable sight right near their homes. Most folks in this small town had seen ice floating in the cold ocean before, but nothing like this. For ice to make it all the way here, it usually had to travel a long way, and most of it melted before it got close. This time, though, that clearly hadn't happened. Either this was the biggest iceberg that had ever floated anywhere, or it had melted way less than normal, and neither of those ideas made much sense. While everyone else was mostly shocked by how enormous the ice was, one person noticed something very different about it. Michael had been watching the iceberg through his good binoculars for a while. He was caught up in the view, but when his eyes moved across the top of the ice, he suddenly froze. He thought he saw something moving up there. He couldn't quite make out what it was, but he was sure something had shifted. After a few seconds, the movement slipped away to the other side of the iceberg, and he lost sight of it. He stood there stunned, but also burning with curiosity about what could possibly be on that iceberg. Whatever or whoever it was must have been up there for days, maybe even weeks. Ice drifts slowly through the ocean so it doesn't move fast. What could it have lived on all that time? And why would it be right at the top of the iceberg? That seemed like the most dangerous spot on this slowly melting piece of ice. Michael wasn't sure what to do next. Should he tell someone? He doubted they would believe him. He had no proof of what he'd seen, and honestly, he wasn't even sure he believed it himself. He could just let it go and get on with his day. If there really was something there, it would probably show itself again. But that's not how Michael's mind worked at all. Whenever something even a little exciting or interesting happened in this quiet little town, he jumped right on it. He got bored so easily every day and needed something to keep his thoughts busy, and this strange movement on the huge iceberg was exactly what he needed. This was going to be his adventure. Michael decided not to tell anyone what he had seen and made up his mind to go out to the iceberg by himself. He knew he could borrow his brother-in-law's small speedboat since he had used it plenty of times before. On the way, he stopped at the store in town to buy some ice climbing gear just in case he needed help getting to the top. Of course, that purchase turned a few heads. Everyone in town was already talking about the giant iceberg that had appeared offshore. When Michael suddenly showed up wanting ice climbing equipment, it didn't take the shop owner long to figure out what he was planning. The owner asked him straight out why he wanted to climb the iceberg. In his eyes, it was a really foolish and dangerous idea, and he wasn't wrong. All Michael said was that he had his reasons and that he was going to do it with or without the gear. It would just be a lot more risky without it. The store owner hesitated for a moment, but finally sold him the equipment. Still, he wasn't about to let it end there. Michael hurried home to get a few things ready for his trip out to the iceberg. He had already called his brother-in-law, who said he'd leave the key in the boat. No one around here would steal it anyway, but just as Michael was about to head out to the boat, he suddenly heard a knock at the door. Through the window, he saw a police car parked right in front of his house. Michael knew right away what must have happened. The store owner had probably called the police after their talk at the shop, and now they had sent someone over to either talk him out of it or maybe even arrest him. Michael had to decide fast. The smart thing would be to just give up and forget the whole adventure, but he didn't want that at all. He wanted nothing more than to reach that iceberg, and he was willing to risk everything for it. With the police knocking on his door again, Michael slipped out the back of his house and took a narrow alley to circle around and stay out of sight. From there, he headed straight for the harbor. He knew exactly where the boat was tied up. He had to keep hidden until he reached it. If the police realized he had run off, there would be real trouble. And when he came back after climbing the iceberg, he would have to face it anyway. But by then, Michael figured he could live with the consequences. As the police kept knocking, Michael eased out his back door, his heart pounding hard. He knew every hidden path in Haven's Edge like the back of his hand. He moved fast, staying in the shadows and avoiding the brighter streets. The rush of adrenaline made everything feel sharper. His mind was locked on one thing: finding out what was on that iceberg. Facing the police later felt small compared to the mystery pulling him out to sea. Michael worked his way through the town's back alleys, a tangle of old shortcuts he knew well. He paused once, crouching behind some bins as a police car slowly rolled past. The usual quiet sounds of the seaside town now made his escape feel even riskier. Every little noise or distant voice made him more alert. The strange pull of the iceberg kept him moving, turning his sleepy town into a quiet game of cat and mouse. When he finally stepped out of the alleys, Michael saw the harbor ahead, still and peaceful in the early light. He moved closer, keeping to the shadows, his eyes scanning for his brother-in-law's boat. The harbor, usually busy with people, felt strangely empty now. He got near the boat, his chest tight with a mix of nerves and excitement. This trip out to the iceberg could change a lot of things. He stopped for a second and looked back at his town, wondering if it might be the last time. Once he reached the boat, Michael listened carefully, then stepped on board as quietly as he could, knowing every creak and corner of it. He untied the ropes without making a sound. The boat rocked gently beneath him, ready to go. He glanced back once more at the shoreline and the familiar shape of his town against the sky. As he started the engine as softly as possible, he realized this journey might uncover something that could affect the whole town. Michael guided the boat out of the harbor, staying close to the shore and away from where the patrols usually went. He spotted the police boat in the distance, its searchlight sweeping across the water. He held his breath and slipped into a small inlet, waiting for the light to move on. When it was safe, he eased the boat back out onto the open sea. The iceberg stood there like a silent giant, its secrets waiting for him in the cold water. As the coastline of Haven's Edge faded into the morning mist, Michael pointed the boat straight toward the iceberg. The familiar harbor was already slipping away behind him. He felt a rush of freedom wash over him. The open sea stretched out ahead, wide and empty. He adjusted the boat's course, feeling the wind push against it. This wasn't just running away anymore. It was a real quest for something out of the ordinary. Michael knew that whatever waited for him out there, his life was going to feel different after this. The sea started out calm, but soon turned rough with rolling waves and strong winds kicking up. Michael's boat rocked hard from side to side, testing how steady he could stay. He held the wheel tight, steering through the choppy water as best he could. The ocean felt wild and unforgiving, pushing back at him with every wave. Cold spray crashed over the front of the boat and soaked him through, but Michael's determination only grew. He wasn't just fighting the sea, he was heading straight into the unknown toward a mystery as big and deep as the water itself. Out there all alone on the wide open sea, Michael's thoughts drifted. His usual quiet days back in Haven's Edge started to feel like something from another life. With nothing but the horizon all around him, he felt more awake than he had in a long time. The thrill of not knowing what was coming, the rush of the whole adventure, filled him with a kind of excitement he hadn't realized he was missing. This trip was more than just chasing after something strange. It was like breaking free from the same old routine and stepping into a bigger world of possibilities. As Michael got closer to the iceberg, its huge size started to feel almost too much to take in. It rose up like a giant frozen wall, quiet and powerful. The morning sun lit up its surface with shifting shades of blue and white, making it look almost unreal. Michael felt a small twist of unease in his chest, mixed with pure wonder. This massive piece of ice that had drifted all the way from the north stood there like a reminder of how much of the world stayed hidden, quietly calling him closer to whatever secrets it held. Michael brought the boat to a stop and dropped anchor near the steep face of the iceberg. He gathered up his climbing gear, each piece feeling like a lifeline for what was coming. The ropes, picks, and crampons were more than just tools. They were what would keep him safe up there. As he put the gear on, his heart beat fast with nervous energy. Climbing this giant wall of ice wasn't only a test of strength, it was a real step into the unknown, a way to see how much courage he actually had. The top waited above him, covered in ice and mystery. Michael moved right up to the base of the iceberg, where the massive wall of ice rose straight up in front of him. He checked his gear one last time, took a slow, deep breath, and started climbing. The ice felt hard and unforgiving, slippery and bitterly cold under his hands. Every move was a careful fight against the tricky surface. He drove his ice axe in firmly and pulled himself up, step by careful step. The only sounds were his own breathing and the sharp crunch of ice under his boots in the quiet, empty air. As he climbed higher, the slope grew steeper and the cracks in the ice widened. Michael carefully worked his way through the frozen maze, his muscles burning with every move. The cold air stung his exposed skin, a sharp reminder of how unforgiving the place was. He stayed focused on his technique, finding a steady rhythm in his steps. Each new height he reached brought a quick moment of relief, mixed with the next challenge. The limits he once thought he had were being pushed further with every meter he gained. Alone on the ice, the world down below started to feel like something from a long time ago. Michael's thoughts drifted as he kept climbing. The quiet around him felt deep, made even stronger by the huge empty space stretching out in every direction. He thought about his simple days back in Haven's Edge, how different they were from what he was doing now. Hanging there between the sky and the sea, he found a strange kind of calm, and his mind felt as clear as the ice all around him. With every tough step, Michael's determination grew stronger. He pushed past the tiredness, driven by a strong need to find out what was waiting at the top of this frozen giant. Every slip and every hard-won grip on the ice reminded him how much he wanted this. He remembered the doubtful looks he had gotten when he first talked about coming out here. Those doubts felt far away now, but they only made him more set on finishing what he started. He wasn't just some guy on an iceberg anymore. He was someone chasing after answers, not scared off by how big nature could be. As he got closer to the top, the real reason for Michael's journey sat heavy in his mind. What had begun as a bold adventure now felt like something much deeper. He wondered what he truly hoped to find up there. Was it only the excitement of the climb, or was it something more? Each step brought him nearer not just to the physical peak, but also to a better sense of his own limits and what he really wanted. The summit, wrapped in mist and mystery, seemed to be calling him to uncover not only its secrets, but a few of his own too. Perched on a small ledge, Michael stopped for a short rest. The endless stretch of ice spread out around him like a white desert under the wide blue sky. He thought about the choices in his life that had brought him to this moment, standing alone on an iceberg. Every decision, every little turn had led him here to this quiet spot in the middle of so much open nature. His old life back in Haven's Edge felt almost strange now, so different from the raw beauty and silence surrounding him. Catching his breath, Michael thought about what drew him to adventures like this. For him, it was more than just chasing a thrill. It was about stepping past what he already knew and facing the unknown. Adventure meant testing himself, facing his fears and seeing where his limits really were. As he looked at the strange ice shapes around him, he realized this journey wasn't so much about beating the iceberg as it was about exploring the parts of himself he had never really tested before. As he kept climbing, Michael caught sight of the summit through the drifting mist. A mix of excitement and nervousness washed over him. The peak that had seemed so far away was finally close enough to reach. Its presence felt both intimidating and thrilling at the same time. He wondered what he would actually find once he got to the top of this huge frozen giant. The summit, which had started as just a symbol for his personal quest, now felt like a real goal almost within his hands. As Michael got closer to the top, his heart started beating faster with anticipation. What would be waiting for him at the summit? Would it just be a bare, empty peak of ice with nothing on it? Or would there be something more? His mind raced with all kinds of possibilities. This whole journey that had begun with a simple look through his binoculars had turned into something much deeper. Reaching the summit now felt like the end of both his physical climb and everything that had been going through his head, a real sign of how far his curiosity and persistence had carried him. With the summit right there in front of him, Michael felt a fresh burst of energy. He pushed himself harder, climbing with renewed strength, driven by curiosity and the fact that he was almost done. Each step took him closer to the unknown and to the answers he had come for. His muscles ached and his breathing grew heavy, but he refused to slow down. The peak was now only a few meters away, quietly calling him to uncover whatever secrets it was hiding and to finish this remarkable journey. Standing at the summit, Michael was surrounded by an incredible view that stretched out in every direction. The ocean lay far below, a wide spread of swirling blues and whites. He felt a strong wave of pride for making it all the way up, but that feeling was mixed with a touch of disappointment. The top turned out to be a bare stretch of ice and snow, empty of any of the answers he had hoped to find. His big achievement felt strangely hollow against the huge, quiet world around him. As he looked around the area, Michael started to notice small signs that suggested he wasn't the only one there. Faint footprints crossed the snow, still fresh enough that the wind had only lightly disturbed them. A feeling of curiosity quickly replaced his earlier disappointment. The idea of another person being all the way out here, so far from any town or help, seemed almost impossible. Yet the tracks were right there in front of him. Who could it be, and what were they doing on this lonely, icy plateau? He kept looking around and soon found clear proof that someone had been active up here recently. A piece of rope left behind, a few scattered tools, and a simple shelter half buried in the snow. Each new find made the mystery feel even bigger. The items looked worn but not old enough to have been sitting there for very long. Questions kept spinning through Michael's mind. Who had been here, and what had they been up to? The empty summit had suddenly turned into a place full of intrigue and things he couldn't yet explain. The clues at the top raised more questions than they gave answers. Michael stood there trying to make sense of it all. The footprints, the tools, and the shelter all pointed to someone who had come here with a clear purpose. Not just someone who had gotten stranded, but what kind of purpose would bring a person to such a remote and harsh place? The lack of clear answers only made his adventure feel more complicated. The iceberg stayed silent and massive around him, holding tightly onto its secrets. Driven by the growing mystery, Michael started searching even harder. He looked carefully all over the summit, hoping to find any extra clues that might help explain who else was up there. Each step pulled him deeper into the puzzle, his eyes moving across the icy ground for anything that didn't belong. The excitement of possibly finding answers gave him new energy, with every possible clue feeling like another piece of a bigger picture he couldn't quite see yet. The iceberg, which had started as just a tough physical climb, had now turned into a real mystery he needed to figure out. Michael's careful search around the summit area led to some surprising finds. Hidden behind a big ice formation, he noticed a series of deep grooves cut into the ice. They didn't look natural at all, more like something people had made. Close by, a small metal box half buried in the snow caught his eye. Inside it, he found a stack of old faded photographs showing the iceberg at different points during its long journey. These unexpected discoveries suggested a story a lot more complicated than he had first thought. As he kept looking deeper, Michael came across clear signs that someone had been living up there. A circle of stones, dark from old soot, showed where a simple fire pit had been made. Nearby, a neat pile of empty food cans and water bottles sat together. This didn't look like the remains of a quick stop. Someone had spent quite a bit of time here. Michael's heart beat faster with curiosity. Who could have managed to stay alive in such a lonely, frozen place? And what had brought them out here all by themselves? He moved a little further and found a simple shelter tucked into a narrow crack in the ice, made from a sturdy tarp held up by a frame of ice axes. The shelter was basic but cleverly put together. Inside, a sleeping bag and a few personal things were scattered around. This hidden little spot, a clear sign of how tough a person could be, pointed to someone who had been living on the iceberg for a while. Michael felt a real sense of awe at how resourceful the person must have been to survive the harsh conditions. Scattered around the shelter were personal items and supplies that started to give a clearer picture of a lone survivor. A worn journal with pages full of handwritten notes and sketches lay next to a wind-up flashlight and a knife. The sight of a photograph showing a smiling person standing in front of what looked like a research station pulled at something in Michael's chest. These small traces of human life in the middle of all this emptiness stirred up a deep feeling of wonder and quiet empathy in him. The most telling discovery came when Michael found some scientific equipment near the shelter. Old notebooks filled with careful observations and data, along with a broken Geiger counter and a battered telescope, suggested the person had been up here for some kind of research. This new information changed how Michael saw the whole situation. The iceberg, which had first seemed like nothing more than a wild piece of nature, now also felt like part of a human story. Maybe a research trip that had gone wrong. Suddenly, the calm sky changed as a fierce blizzard swept over the summit. Michael, caught by surprise, quickly scrambled to build a shelter using the tarpaulin from the discovered spot and his own climbing ropes. He put together a simple refuge against the strong, howling winds. The ice around him turned into a swirling white blur, and every second counted as he fought the rapidly worsening conditions. His survival instincts took over and guided every move he made. Inside his basic shelter, Michael struggled against the harsh elements. The wind roared like something wild, pulling hard at the tarpaulin and threatening to tear it away. He wrapped himself tightly in the sleeping bag, trying to hold on to whatever body heat he could as the temperature dropped sharply. The cold worked its way deep into his bones, a constant reminder of how unforgiving the iceberg could be. Every strong gust tested the strength of his little shelter, the only thin barrier between him and the freezing danger outside. As the night went on, Michael's resourcefulness was really put to the test. He carefully rationed the small amount of food and water he had brought, knowing the days ahead might be uncertain. Using a small stove he found in the shelter, he melted snow so he could drink. The situation felt serious, but Michael refused to let himself give in to despair. Every small thing he did to stay alive, from saving heat to keeping his shelter standing, felt like a quiet victory against the harsh environment. Throughout the long, difficult night, Michael lay awake while the storm raged around him. His thoughts kept shifting between worry about his own safety and curiosity about the iceberg's secrets. The isolation felt heavy, with each howl of the wind reminding him how alone and vulnerable he was. But in the quieter moments between gusts, he started planning what he would do next. The storm was a tough challenge, but it hadn't weakened his determination to figure out the iceberg's mysteries. As dawn finally broke, the storm slowly died down, leaving behind a peaceful quiet. Michael carefully stepped out of his shelter and found a world completely changed by fresh snow and ice. The landscape looked dangerous, but also strikingly beautiful in the soft morning light. With the weather easing up, Michael got ready to keep exploring. He knew the calm might not last long, but his resolve to learn the truth about whoever had been living on the iceberg stayed strong. As the storm cleared, Michael went back to his search and found even more signs of the mysterious person who had been there. Scattered around the shelter were different tools, each one hinting at its own story. A half-buried notebook with pages covered in scribbles and sketches caught his eye. Nearby, a pair of worn gloves lay forgotten, stiff from the cold. Every item Michael discovered added another piece to the growing mystery, a real, tangible link to the person who had once made this icy place their home. Venturing beyond the shelter, Michael spotted a trail of footprints in the fresh snow. With each careful step, he followed the tracks, his curiosity growing stronger. The footprints led him across the summit, winding between the tall ice formations. They acted like a silent guide, pulling him deeper into the heart of the iceberg. The thought of being so close to solving the mystery made his pulse quicken. Who had walked this same path before him, and where had it taken them? The footprints brought Michael to a hidden spot where he found what looked like a simple research station. Under a camouflage tarp, he discovered scientific instruments, worn by time but still in one piece. A portable weather station, some geological samples, and an old rusted camera suggested this had been part of a real scientific effort. This quiet corner of the iceberg had clearly been someone's base, a place for watching and studying right in the middle of the frozen wilderness. Among the things at the research station, Michael found a stack of documents and journals. The pages showed the work of a scientist named Dr. Jensen, who had been studying the iceberg's path and what it was made of. His notes were careful and detailed, full of observations, ideas, and even some personal thoughts. The journals gave a clear picture of a man who was deeply passionate about his research, someone willing to stay out here alone and face the dangers just to understand more about the Arctic. As Michael put the pieces together, he started to see how big Dr. Jensen's work had been. The iceberg wasn't just a floating chunk of ice. It had served as a moving laboratory, a place for real scientific discovery. Dr. Jensen's research gave useful insights into climate patterns and how glaciers moved. Michael felt a deep respect for the scientist's dedication. In the middle of all that icy loneliness, Dr. Jensen had kept chasing knowledge, and now that quiet legacy was right there in Michael's hands. In the thick fog, a figure suddenly appeared, startling Michael. It was Dr. Harold Jensen, the very scientist whose story he had just started to uncover. Dr. Jensen looked tired, his face worn from the tough conditions, but his eyes still held a bright, steady spark. The first shock quickly turned into a flood of questions. Michael, full of curiosity, and Dr. Jensen, caught off guard by the unexpected visitor, began speaking carefully, slowly closing the distance between them. At first, Dr. Jensen stayed cautious, keeping his answers short and guarded. He watched Michael closely, trying to figure out what he wanted. As they kept talking, his wariness slowly eased. Michael told him his own story, how simple curiosity had brought him out to the iceberg and what he had found along the way. This honest exchange softened some of the tiredness in Dr. Jensen's face. Realizing they were both driven by the same desire to understand things, a quiet respect started to grow between the two men. As the fog lifted, Dr. Jensen started to open up and share his remarkable story. He talked about his research, how a sudden storm had left him stranded on the iceberg, and the long fight he had gone through to stay alive. His tale was full of resilience, clever ideas, and a steady passion for his scientific work. Michael listened closely, completely caught up in the scientist's endurance. Dr. Jensen's experiences, filled with tough challenges and moments of real despair, showed just how strong the human spirit could be. Sitting together in the middle of the huge stretch of ice, Michael and Dr. Jensen realized they were now facing the same difficult situation. Their conversation shifted toward making plans. They talked about their limited supplies, the unpredictable weather, and whether they could find a way to signal for help. As they worked through their ideas, a quiet bond started to form between them, built from facing the same hardship. In this empty, frozen place, they were no longer strangers. They were two people brought together by circumstance and a shared determination to get through it. Even though their situation was serious, Michael and Dr. Jensen found some comfort in their new companionship. Their talks included practical plans as well as a few light moments and shared laughs, which brought a small sense of normal life to the icy surroundings. The heavy feeling of being alone started to fade, replaced by the warmth of simple human connection. In this unexpected meeting on the frozen peak, they discovered not only a common goal for survival but also a quiet friendship, a small beacon of hope in the middle of the cold wilderness. As their supplies got dangerously low, Michael and Dr. Jensen knew they had to do something. Together, they built a simple beacon using parts from Dr. Jensen's equipment and Michael's climbing gear. They set it up at the highest spot they could safely reach, hoping its signal would cut through the thick fog and the wide empty stretch of sea and ice. It was a desperate try, but it lit a small spark of hope in the harsh Arctic surroundings. As they waited for rescue, a severe storm hit, testing their already difficult situation. The wind howled with fierce strength, threatening to rip apart their shelter and put out their beacon. Huddled together, Michael and Dr. Jensen worked hard to keep the beacon going, their hands numb and their faces stung by the icy wind. The storm felt like an unstoppable force, a clear reminder of nature's harsh power in this far-off part of the world. In the middle of the blizzard's chaos, the beacon became their only real lifeline. It stood as a small, shining symbol of hope against all the odds, still sending out its signal through the storm's fury. Michael and Dr. Jensen watched it with nervous hope, knowing their survival might depend on that faint call for help. The beacon held on through the wild weather, a quiet proof of their cleverness and their strong will to keep going. As the storm kept raging, a search and rescue helicopter, alerted by the police back in Haven's Edge, appeared on the horizon. The crew had spotted the beacon signal even through the bad weather. Michael and Dr. Jensen, tired and nearly worn out by the elements, felt a sudden wave of relief and disbelief wash over them. The helicopter moved closer, fighting the strong winds, bringing the promise of safety and the end of their long time on the Iceberg. Aboard the rescue helicopter, Michael and Dr. Jensen watched the Iceberg slowly fade away behind them. They thought back on everything they had been through. The isolation, the struggle to survive, and the unexpected friendship that had grown between them. The experience had changed them both, creating a bond that only people who face real hardship together can truly understand. As they flew toward safety, they knew this was more than just a rescue. It was the beginning of a new chapter in their lives, shaped by resilience, friendship, and a deep respect for the wild beauty of nature. If this story touched you or kept you on the edge of your seat, I'd love for you to share it with someone who might enjoy a good adventure too. Hit that like button if you felt the tension and the heart in it, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the next story. Your support means the world and keeps these tales coming. Thanks for watching.